The concept of ancient Egypt generally refers to the roughly 3,000-year history from the Naqada culture period around 3500 BC to the era of Alexander the Great in 332 BC. Throughout this long history, ancient Egypt was divided into numerous periods and dynasties, and the state itself embraced a wide variety of ethnic cultures and religious beliefs. However, generally speaking, the living environment of the ancient Egyptians was far from comfortable. They were surrounded by the Sahara Desert, to the point that the word desert actually originated from Egypt, and almost the entire population was crowded into an area that accounts for only 5% of Egypt's landmass today. Geographically, ancient Egypt can basically be divided into two major parts. The north is Lower Egypt, and the south is Upper Egypt. You might ask, why is it reversed? This is because upper and lower here are determined by the flow direction of the Nile River. The upper reaches of the Nile are in the south, hence Upper Egypt, and the river eventually flows into the sea in the north, making the north Lower Egypt. The northern Lower Egypt was the center of grain production, while the southern Upper Egypt had a dry climate with frequent droughts. Therefore, in the struggle for limited living resources, this region later saw constant warfare. Perhaps influenced by their harsh living environment, the ancient Egyptians held a pious and grateful attitude towards food. This is evident from the many animal-headed gods in the Egyptian mythological system, as well as the massive amounts of food buried with the deceased during funerals. Preparing for the afterlife with the best versions of their daily lives was their attitude toward death. So, in this ancient civilization bordering the Mediterranean Sea to the north, the Red Sea to the east, and surrounded by deserts, what kind of culinary culture was nurtured? In this video, we will briefly introduce the dietary culture of ancient Egypt from four aspects: staple foods, vegetables, meat, and alcoholic beverages. Video production is not easy, so if you enjoy it and find the quality acceptable, please give it a like and support us. I bow to you in front of the screen and thank you in advance. Let me now lay it all out for you. Grains were the core of the ancient Egyptian diet. The grains commonly eaten by the Egyptians included barley and a type of grain called emmer wheat. The Egyptians used them to make bread, but possibly due to the climate at the time, the bread always contained a lot of sand during the making process. This was discovered and inferred by archaeologists when they studied the teeth of mummies. In addition to traditional bread, the Egyptians also innovated with wheat, creating a crispy flatbread, which later evolved into a famous national dessert, Umm Ali. To make it, the flatbread is crushed, baked with butter, and then a large pot of milk and condensed milk is boiled. Finally, the mixture is poured over the breadcrumbs, sprinkled with nuts, and baked again, and it's ready. What do you guys think? Personally, I'm not a big fan of sweets. Besides barley and wheat, rice is, of course, one of the staple foods for Egyptians today, but the ancient Egyptians never had the chance to taste it, as it was only brought over by Arab conquerors around 640 AD. Vegetables are a very interesting part of the Egyptian diet. Due to geographical distances, many Egyptian vegetables are quite unfamiliar to us. But there are relatively familiar ones, of course, like garlic, which the Egyptians were documented to be cultivating 5,000 years ago. In comparison, China also had garlic very early on, but it was a single clove variety with extremely low yield and a slender shape. The garlic in the traditional sense was not introduced and cultivated in China until the Western Han Dynasty by Zhang Qian from the western regions. Then there is the onion, which also held a very special status in ancient Egypt. This pungent, tear-inducing vegetable was always given extra meanings. In medieval Europe, it was used to treat various diseases and even ward off vampires. Meanwhile, the Egyptians metaphysically believed that the concentric layers of an onion symbolized the cycle of life and death, and that the secret to infinite immortality was hidden within. It is said that when Ramesses IV was buried, onions were placed in his eye sockets, putting onions over his eyes. Were you that afraid he wouldn't be able to cry in the afterlife? Okra is also a vegetable frequently eaten by Egyptians, and its place of origin is indeed Africa. Today, it has another more memorable nickname, plant Viagra. The Japanese also call it green ginseng or simply kidney-nourishing grass. No wonder I love eating okra so much now. Since summer is here, first stir-fry some eggs, pour in plenty of soy sauce, then add chopped bird's eye chilies and minced garlic. Once the aroma comes out, diagonally slice the okra and toss it in. Add some button mushrooms with their original broth, and give it a quick, light thickening before taking it off the heat. It makes an absolutely fantastic stew. Afterward, boil some hand-pulled noodles, pour the stew over them, and once you finish the noodles, if there's still some broth left, mix in 2 spoonfuls of noodle soup, add a couple of drops of sesame oil, and it is incredibly satisfying. Now that the common vegetables are covered, let's talk about some relatively unfamiliar ones. For instance, Egyptian lentils, which can be said to be the most important vegetable in the ancient Egyptian diet. These lentils are different from what we usually picture. They are dark brown, and only the beans are eaten. What do you think they look like? Back in the day, these lentils were even used as wages to pay some of the workers building the pyramids. Today, lentils are also one of the main ingredients in Koshari, Egypt's national dish. My intuitive feeling about this dish is that it's a carb hodgepodge, because the main ingredients include not only rice but also macaroni and a type of Egyptian vermicelli. After adding various toppings, it's finally drenched in a generous amount of tomato sauce. Don't be fooled by the lack of meat. If you actually eat a whole plate of it, it will definitely keep you full for a long time. Additionally, there is tiger nut, also known as chufa. This is an ancient yet trendy food that was commonly eaten by the ancient Egyptians. It's about the size of a hazelnut or chickpea, and its skin gets wrinkled after drying, making it look completely unappealing. However, around 2013, it was dug up by health food enthusiasts and heavily hyped. Today, its biggest fans are in Valencia, Spain, because it is the main ingredient in the famous local beverage, horchata. At first glance, it really does look like a nut, but once you put it in your mouth, you might regret it because it completely lacks the crunchy texture of a nut. It is actually a small tuberous plant, so in ancient Egypt, people even ground it into flour, shaped it, and cooked it further. As for the exact taste, I have no idea. Has anyone eaten it? You can describe it. I think its biggest significance is as a nut substitute. If you have a nut allergy but still want to eat nuts, this is the perfect choice. If you are lactose intolerant, tiger nuts can also be made into lactose-free fake milk. Molokhia, also known as jute mallow or Jew's mallow, most likely originated in Egypt. This vegetable tastes extremely bitter when eaten raw, but when cooked, it thickens soups and stews, making it best suited for stewing with various meats. The ancient Egyptians once thought it was poisonous. It is said that in 1674 BC, when Egypt was ruled by the Hyksos, the rulers forced the Egyptians to eat Molokhia with the intention of poisoning them all. As a result, after eating it, people found that it did nothing but clear internal heat. Only then did they realize Molokhia was non-toxic, and it later became a deeply loved vegetable. Today, Molokhia chicken soup with rice has become the most home-style dietary combination for Egyptians. It looks like a very appetizing soup dish, roughly equivalent to the effect of pairing sliced boiled pork with rice. When cooking, first boil a large pot of chicken broth, then shred the chicken. Stir-fry the Molokhia, pour the chicken broth back in, simmer for a while, and then put the chicken back in to boil together, and it's done. Besides these, there is another plant that, although I don't know if it can be classified as a vegetable, is definitely worth mentioning: the famous papyrus. There are 5 major native writing systems in the world: the cuneiform of ancient Babylon, the Chinese characters based on oracle bone inscriptions, the linear A and B scripts of Crete and Greece, and the hieroglyphs of ancient Egypt. The main medium for hieroglyphs back then was papyrus. Of course, because papyrus is not easy to preserve, the later decipherment of hieroglyphs relied mainly on the Rosetta Stone. Papyrus was truly a treasure trove for the Egyptian people, just as important to them as bamboo was to ancient China. Besides making paper, its dried stems could be used for building fires and houses. The pith could be made into wicks for lighting, and the outer skin could be woven into baskets, mats, and straw sandals for daily use. You could even extract fragrances from it for rituals and to repel mosquitoes. Its tender shoots could be eaten raw, and the inner stems could be eaten after boiling. However, because papyrus leaves are very sharp, it was quite inconvenient for humans to eat, so its role in the dietary field gradually faded. Even when consumed, it was mostly used to feed livestock. Meat in the era of ancient Egypt was extremely expensive and basically a privilege reserved for the rich and nobility. Meat rarely appeared on the tables of commoners, but if it did, 9 times out of 10 it would be pork. Because pork was considered unclean in ancient Egypt, it was rarely consumed by the upper class. Later, the image of the pig even became associated with the god of death, Set. This is the image of Set. Would you say it's a pig? It looks a bit like one, but some say it's a jackal. On the tables of the rich and nobility, the main types of meat were beef and mutton. As for fish, tilapia was by far the most commonly consumed fish in ancient Egypt, bar none. Tilapia and the Nile River sound like such a perfect match, though the two names actually have no connection at all. The Chinese translation for tilapia is actually a transliteration from Vietnamese. Additionally, due to religious beliefs, different types of fish in Egypt were often given different symbolic meanings, and there were strict rules about who could eat which species. For example, eel was once considered a holy, upper-class food in ancient Egypt. Among poultry, with the development of domestication techniques, geese gradually became more important in ancient Egypt. But initially, the Egyptians' favorite poultry prey was undoubtedly the Egyptian goose. There is even a theory that the practice of force-feeding geese originated with the Egyptians. They didn't do this to get fatty foie gras, but rather it was a means for the upper class to obtain higher quality food. They did the same to cattle. After all, a plump animal is definitely more appetizing. The Egyptians were highly gifted when it came to brewing. They managed to create the two mainstream alcoholic beverages of today's world, beer and wine. Among them, beer held a very important position in Egypt. However, the Egyptian beer of that time was vastly different from what we have today. Due to immature brewing techniques, the beer back then contained many coagulated lumps and a thick, hard layer of sediment at the bottom. Therefore, ancient Egyptian beer had to be consumed through a straw. Its alcohol content was also pitifully low, meaning you could drink it all day without worrying about getting drunk. Just like lentils, beer was also used as payment for the workers building the pyramids. Wine appeared in Egypt around 3000 BC and was likely first introduced from Mesopotamia. However, the ancient Egyptians certainly made significant contributions to the advancement of wine, cultivating many influential grape varieties. Furthermore, after mastering brewing techniques, the ancient Egyptians expanded their range of ingredients. For instance, there was palm wine, fermented from the sap of palm trees. Besides drinking, the Egyptians also used it as a washing liquid to cleanse corpses before mummification. In addition, pomegranates, poppy seeds, and carob were all once used for brewing. Egypt has a long and enduring history. In its early stages, the natural conditions surrounding the Nile Valley nurtured an ancient civilization, characterized geographically by barren deserts interspersed with sweet oases. For a long time, this geographical environment protected Egypt from invasions, allowing it to develop in peace. However, after the end of the pharaonic era, Egypt repeatedly fell under the rule of foreign powers for over 2,300 years. These foreign groups included the Persians, Greeks, Romans, the Byzantine Empire, Arabs, Ottoman Turks, and the British Empire. Behind every conquest, the dietary habits and cultural customs of the conquerors exerted an influence on Egypt. After the glint of swords and the clamor of war faded into the past, Egypt silently absorbed and integrated them all. Such profound historical accumulation is far too vast to be summarized in a single video. So, I think this topic is worth keeping on the back burner. We can dig deeper into it again after giving it some time to cool down. What do you guys think?